This is a test. This station is conducting a test of the broadcasting system. This is only a test. The broadcasters of your area have developed this system to keep you informed. This is only a test.
Sounds good.
Hey, how's it going? What's up, Ghost Kid? How have you been?
Hi.
This is Dare. If you're new here, I'm Cody, and we are Shadow Veil Society. Welcome. How's everyone doing? Well, thank you so much. Cool music. Thank you. Yeah, I set that up the other day. For a fun little intro for us. How have you been? There, Ghost Kid was one of my regulars. Came and hang out. Oh, came and hung out. All the time when I was actively streaming. Been away
Oh,
for
awesome.
so long. uh, yeah, we're back and we're making games now. Pretty exciting stuff. Yeah. What do you have to say?
When was the last time you streamed?
Oh my
Before this?
god. Too long. Like, I don't even know. Maybe I don't even know. Probably getting close to a year ish at this point.
Okay.
I was streaming like pretty consistently for a long while. And then just
Okay.
fell off so hard. And yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that it's super easy to, like, when you're in the habit of doing it and it's like part of your routine or whatever, it's normal, and then stop doing it, I get like super in my head about it, where it's like, been away too long, no one's gonna show up, like no one's gonna watch it, and then I just don't do it forever.
Yeah, I imagine it's like going to the gym and stuff, right?
Exactly.
Any habit, drinking, eating healthy, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, I mean, I did a hard switch of like, okay, I'm at my desk because I'm working pretty regularly, to then being like, there are no animation jobs and I haven't been working for so long, to where I like took a break and stepped away from, like, I don't want to be at my desk all day every day. I'm switching it up and moving to the couch to play PS5 instead. So I took a time off and platinumed Elden Ring in that time. I was hard at work. Yeah.
I was gonna say, are we calling that relaxing? Because that doesn't sound very relaxing.
It was not very relaxing, but it was good. I didn't feel like streaming it. Like, I used to have my PS5 like in here at my desk and like all set up to where I could stream from PS5 or PC, but that was just for me. Some me time.
Yeah.
Cool. Switch this screen. So this is what we got going on right now. First of all, welcome to our first stream. We were just saying before we hopped in and pressed that go live button that it's a shame you can't, or you could, but probably more headache than it's worth of all the stuff and all the like prep work that it takes to actually get ready to hit start streaming and go live, where it's just all like technical shit where you're troubleshooting and trying to make sure everything works and trying to do something new, where for the first time we're doing these, we're calling the SoulSplit stream, where we're both going to be streaming together and working on two different sides of our project, but wanting to show all of it. It's all super exciting, and I think it's going to be cool to look back on. But
I love how you've undersold that, because like 2 hours ago you were ready to go. It was all set up, and then it's like, oh, but what if we show two
yeah,
screens and two cameras and two of everything, and throw all that
exactly.
hard work you've done
Throw it
out the
out.
window for a minute?
We're
Yeah,
doing something different now.
yeah.
Yeah, which is very true. I when we first hopped in to Discord and we're talking about like, all right, are we ready? And I was catching Dare up on like everything that we did and everything I've been working on like the past couple days to you know, get this running as smoothly as possible. And then we're like, oh shit, wait, how do we do this with sharing two cameras and two screens and everything all at the same time? And because we thought it was going to be easy, which was probably, you know, my first mistake, was assuming that it wouldn't be as much of a hassle as it was. But hey, we're here, we did it, and now it can only go up. Yeah, we're gonna have some fun overlays coming soon, so this looks a little bit nicer. But for the time being, job done. It's not terrible. Not terrible, boy.
I think it looks good. It goes good. You said you took an accidental nap. Is this the kind of nap that you wake up and you're like, that was awesome? Or the kind of nap where you wake up and you're like, what day is it? Where am I?
What year is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I hate those. I feel like I hate napping in general, which sounds crazy. Because I feel like when I do it, I'm like, oh, I needed that. Like, I feel better for doing that on the other side. But I am very much like in a very unhealthy state of mind of like, I can't nap. Like, that's too much time. Like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'll get to it later.
That's kind of what I'm at. Growing up, did your dad ever, or like any dads in your life, just they can fall asleep anywhere? Was that a thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Since I had kids, I have the same ability.
Yeah,
It doesn't
like
matter where I am. Yeah, I can get on a train and I need to get off in 15 minutes, and I will sleep for 15 minutes on the train. And then my stop
and you
comes
just
and I'm
immediately know, and you're like, oh, we gotta go, kids, come on.
Yep, time to get off. Yep.
Yeah,
it's like a superpower I gained through fatherhood.
I mean, that's pretty exciting, because for me, I feel like that's always like the reason I don't want to do it, because if it's like I'm gonna take a nap for any amount of time or whatever it is, I won't wake up. Like, will be very much out, and then I'll like stay up way too late and be miserable because of the decisions that I've made that have led me to there. The consequences of my own actions.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always tired, so I just fall asleep given the opportunity.
Uh-oh, what is happening? Hold on. So I can still hear you through Discord. All of your video elements just dropped out for some reason.
Oh no. I think my internet cut, although it looks like only briefly.
Cool.
You,
That's
you
okay.
hear me still?
Yeah, I can still hear you. Oh wait, I see you now.
Cool. Yeah.
This is gonna be
Okay, that wasn't so bad.
no. Perfect. Dang, second time. Only got 4 hours of sleep last night. That sucks. I feel like I've kind of been there too, lately, just not sleeping well or just like tossing and turning all night and not feeling like super well rested the next day. That sucks. That's a terrible feeling.
You know, if you're super tired as well, I don't know if you get this. I get this thing where I'm like, am I getting ill? Like, am I going to get sick?
Yeah.
Or am I just tired?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, the whole body starts to shut down, and I'm like, am I getting sick? Oh, no.
Yeah.
I just hadn't slept
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah, exactly. So if you don't know, and if you're maybe just seeing this for the first time or whatever, we are working on a deck building dungeon crawler, and we're still pretty fresh. Like, we only really started actively working on this, I don't know, not too long ago, like a couple weeks maybe. So we're still very, very early in, but I mean, at least for me, figuring out a lot of things as we go, which I think will be fun. I'm excited, at least. So
Yeah.
I was trying to think earlier what could be like my immediate thing to be working on at the and I know we had designed this, and I wanted to ask you this, but I also kind of want to wait till stream. I know with some of the very first like immediate things that I threw out, we had said that we liked, or were kind of leaning towards, a square card shape, but then I know I did this, like the tombstone version.
Yeah.
I was thinking of like redoing this or reshaping this to make it more of a square shape, because I do like that and feel like that would be nice. Stay with that. What are your thoughts? How do you
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. This has been kind of bouncing around my head as well, because if I find some card stuff, what did I call it? Bless, maybe? No. Card effect.
I feel like we could go a few different ways with this, where, you know, more of like a traditional layout where, okay, we have our prop or whatever it is, something kind of like this,
Yeah.
where, you know, we can, because I've been thinking about a million different things at the same time, as you would, and I know you're right there with me on this. Trying to solve
I like
every
this.
individual problem all at once.
Yeah, I like this a lot. The way up for me is the like quantity of effects. So I still fairly strongly believe, but don't know 100% sure, that we're going to end up with this underlying system where all cards have a set of effects, and they probably won't have more than a handful. It's like 3 or 4. So you can see right now I've got this diamond. I mean, you did these diamonds originally. I've just like made them uglier. This diamond system where like each diamond represents an effect, and I imagine that if you had a square card and the symbol, I've called them pips, which maybe isn't a great name, but
like
each
the
of these
effect
pips
modifiers
really
for attack, poison, whatever various thing these cards have attached to.
Yeah, if they really well represented what it was going to do, I think the square card with the pips makes perfect sense. If it doesn't mean anything until you like click the card, then I wonder if the more traditional card shape works.
Right.
Because you could describe it, right? So here, if you imagine on your screen, if you slid the dagger up and the word dagger up with its plate, underneath
That's exactly what I was about to say. It was, then if we move this up, then have that bottom third of the graphic that says, like more of like a standard kind of card description where it says, oh, dagger does +1 bleed damage or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. And the good thing about that as well is you end up naming them. You end up naming the effects. Yeah, exactly. So call it bleed as an example. You end up naming it bleed, which means the player reads it as bleed, and it means that a link is created in your head that you believe the weapon, the card, is making them bleed, and that you have like a link in your head. Whereas if the color of the bleed pip was just red, you don't necessarily create that link. I can describe it to the player as bleed 100 times, but you won't remember it as bleed in your head. You'll remember it as like red or something.
Right. And I think that general kind of thoughts that I've been having is that we could this initially, to me, the banner with like the 1 would be like the just like base damage that something deals. Where it's like, oh yeah, this card does 1 damage. Any additional modifiers that we have on an object or an item, we could then have different visual elements that represent whatever. So say it's a bleed, for example. We could have like, and depending on kind of what we're thinking, maybe it's like an additional. So if we wanted to go back to something like this, we could have an additional banner or something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, here's like another additional banner that hangs underneath that one that now has like a little like blood drop on it. And that lets you know like, oh, this item deals bleed damage. Or, if it's necrotic damage or whatever, it's like a black banner with like a skull and crossbones or something, or whatever it might be. I think we can do that, or we could have it like there's so many options is the thing. We could have, okay, base damage is there. We've dropped visuals. Are you still there? I'll switch to this for the time being. Oh, wait. Hi. Are you there?
Am I back?
Oh, I can hear you now. See? I can hear you, but no visual. Oh, there we go. Slowly but surely. There we go.
That's horrible. It keeps going out. I mean, it's good that it's me and not you, but it's still horrible.
Yeah, it's not ideal, and I think if it does like keep happening or whatever, you know, we took the time to set up a million different scenes to where I can just full screen it or something until I know like you're back in it and switch back. It's not the end of the world, but no fun either.
No fun at all. This is a horrible picture I'm drawing, which of course
No, I like it.
definitely worth the wait. Don't do that. I was going to say that the other thing you could do. Is that you could just drop the numbers if we knew the numbers would stay low, which we don't know. But we could force the numbers to stay low. You could have it so for each bleed you get like that's meant to be a blood drop, but you can imagine if that was pointier, it would be more blood drop. You could have, do you know what I mean? You could just repeat the symbol for each thing.
Oh, sure.
For the cards right now, this would kind of work. If I look at healing as an example, here we go. So the like all these effects here draw to basically 3 is as high as it gets, and when it's a 3, there's nothing else that it does. It's just a 3. Do this. Yeah, so the animated shield is defense 3. Giant blade. Okay, yeah. So there you go. So this is the most complicated card right now is the Divine Blade, which does attack 3, healing 1. So
Okay.
that would be 4 symbols. But the downside of this is, as we create the balance curve.
Right. Yeah.
Is my internet just trash today? Is that what this is?
I mean, that was me the other day. I was having so many issues for no reason either. I mean, thankfully I wasn't like trying to do anything, but it's very frustrating when it happens. So I feel for you.
Yeah. Strange. Yeah, so in theory you could repeat the symbols down the left hand side if we knew we were going to keep it to a low amount of symbols, but that's going to make it hard to like balance out the difficulty curve because we or like the progression curve, because you'd be locked into having low amount of each ability.
I think of the two, like, I think there's a scenario where, like you said, where you're... Oh, did I lose you again? Maybe. We'll figure it out. Yeah, I think if you can still hear me, I'll keep talking. I can listen. I think that I would rather have a number to convey status effects for however much additional damage it's going to deal.
Sorry, as you could probably
there you
hear,
go.
I was
Are you back?
cutting in and out like an insane amount.
Yeah.
Froze.
That's okay. I was saying... Oh. Dude, as soon as I start talking, it drops the camera again. I can
Oh my
still,
God.
I can still hear you in Discord at least, so you can still be heard, and I can see your screen share, but your camera is dropped. I wonder if it's something with that, like, height thing, like, something weird with, like, the connection.
Oh, it could be. Yeah, that's a good point.
So that, in order to get this to work, we're having to use an additional third-party browser thing to connect us to both be able to have both of our screens shared and both of our cameras shared at the same time. Mine isn't having these issues, I think, only because my computer is the one, like, hosting the stream. So I think it's just something, that's my guess, at least, something with, like, that, having to use that other host to get us all in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Keeps bouncing into the Shadow Veil realm.
Honestly, yeah.
At least it's on brand.
Yeah.
Okay, so something I was trying to say, and if you cut out again, that's okay. It's no worries.
And then stay there. Yeah, carry on.
No need to be worried. I think there's a scenario where, like you said, when it might not be that way now, like a week in, but I could see a potential future when we're trying to balance cards and stuff like that, where if we end up stacking, so like we have, like, oh yeah, drops of blood, and they're all just, like, stacking on top of each other. I think there is a non-zero chance that it starts to just get too visual heavy, especially thinking that if we have some kind of crazy card that does, like, it does bleed damage and it does poison damage, or it's like a dual type, whatever.
Yep.
If it does multiple of each of those things, and then it does, like, additional base damage of, like, whatever it does, there's gonna just be, like, shit all over the card at all times.
Yeah, 100%. But
like, especially,
if you
like,
just increase the number, it becomes a non-issue.
Exactly. So then we have, okay, it does bleed, and now it does 3 damage, and then then you're just changing one element of it without having to worry about, like, when we go like port it to mobile or whatever, getting absolutely unreadable really quickly, I think. And that could be, like, another thing too, if we do want to, like, squash down our card shape to have, like, that square design, or something, like, not so whatever, not so, like, standard card shape. That also kind of helps alleviate that issue then of, well, now we have all of these things, and it's just a lot of clutter to look at.
Yeah, it is.
I think of those options, I would rather have it as, like, a number change out instead.
I think so too.
Okay, cool.
I think so too. An argument for rectangular cards that I have is I quite like you can kind of see both of ours actually on the stream right now. Both of ours, both of the options right now. You did them both. The square ones are cool, and you can kind of tell they're cards, but they're a little bit different. And then the tombstone that you've got is also cool. It's more traditional card shapes. I'm basically thinking if we want to get weird with it, there's probably only so weird you can go before they're not recognizable as cards anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that from like screenshots and trailers, it might not immediately be obvious that they're playing a card game.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I it can go either way, you know. Like I think with okay, so we've had a few different options so far. This was one of the first ones that we did. Again, very
Still love it.
very simple. Something to. These were designed by me again with like very much a placeholder of, hey, something else is coming, but here's a physical like graphic that you can have to start doing what you do. So this was the first kind of card design that I threw out. And then this is what we were looking at when we were potentially considering like a non-traditional card format. Something a little bit more short, square. And again, this was I still kind of like this idea that I had where the little like pips that we could have would be designed in a way that represents the damage that they deal. So like this, you know, like, oh, having one be like a bloody kind of shape or whatever, like, oh, we know this does, like, this is the dagger and it deals 1 bleed damage. Where, you know, if we had like a green slime one or something like that, it'd be like, oh, this deals poison damage, you know, depending on how the individual indicators were designed, that would, you know, go hand in hand. What type of damage it does. But then this was the kind of like second evolution of this, where it was like, oh, what if it's more designed instead of, you know, just like a little kind of like diamond shape or whatever. And I kind of came up with like just like a banner over it, which I thought was fun. So that's where this comes. The kind of general vibe that we've been. This is where it's been left. This is the last like card design that I had worked on before I kind of switched gears to focus on making a website and getting all of our social media stuff set up, and kind of taking a step back to work on like branding and all of that.
Yeah. So actually, do you know what? When you lay it out like that, we've kind of delayed the decision a bit, like intentionally. It might be worth us continuing to delay it just a little bit longer.
For sure.
Because I think we're just at the place now where we're going to discover how obvious it is what these cards do. So like through gameplay. So like right now, at least for me, you can see my screen. You got these 4 cards. It is super unclear what they do, right? And that's okay, but it would need to be clearer than it is now. So we could fix the problem in through trial and error, through iteration, before we decide. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely.
I built this deck. That makes it sound so much further along than it is. Let me show you how I built this deck to not give any false promises. If this reloads. By the way, I think my internet was dying because my wife was doing something crazy. Because she's gone to bed and all the issues have disappeared. Not to blame not to blame anyone. Ah, no, that's horrible. Okay, sorry. I started it, clicked the wrong button immediately.
That's okay.
I need to add a restart button. Is it? Okay, cool. So in cards here, you can see all the cards that are in the game. And then my deck is up here. I intentionally picked the cards that are the best at killing things, so they have the highest raw damage. That's what these are. And when I click these, that's what makes the deck. So even though I've done that, it isn't clear to me what they do when I'm actually trying to play. I chose the name of the cards. I've got their stats up here on the side, and it's still not clear. That's a sign that it's not clear enough, right?
Again, I think it is important for both of us to remember that we just started this, and it is crazy to me, just like the fact that this has its own like desktop icon already, and you can actually click it and something opens, and there's things inside of it that vaguely look like anything, is absolutely wild.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I think that is again like something we have to remember or remind ourselves is that like it's okay that it looks like this, and we're figuring these things out, like you know, as we move along, and that's just how this works.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so let me show you where we're at right now. I've got a to-do list in here, and I'll show you why the to-do list looks like the way it is. So the recent 2 things I did is I made it so that you get drops now. I'll show you that in a second. And you can view them from the town, but you don't actually use them. So how that looks is I'm in a dungeon now. It put me straight in a dungeon because I was in a dungeon when I quit the game. That's intentional, but what's not intentional is that while you're in a dungeon, you cannot escape unless you defeat the dungeon. Gain some actions. Kill this guy, bring him to 4 health. Short sword. It's not enough to kill him because he used defense. Ring of restoration, sure. I should be able to divine blade. Yeah, this will kill him. Nice. Okay, so he did very little to me. He's easy, so anyway, dead. Okay, I get this thing. This icon comes from an icon pack, which I paid for, but like 2-3 years ago. But so in theory you could focus your efforts here if you think this is the most immersion breaking thing right now, but I actually think it's not too bad. Events don't really work in dungeons, but they will soon. Okay, so I collected one thing there, and the thing I killed was a goblin. So if I go into the dungeons, so I killed a goblin. Find the goblin in here. Okay, so whenever you kill a goblin, there's a 100% chance that you receive a goblin bone. Okay, that's what we saw, even though it looked like a chest. It's actually a goblin bone. Let me kill this guy as well. I'm going to finish the dungeon, which is not that far away. Wing boots, short sword, sure. Is he dead yet? No. Wing boots twice. Excellent. So we'll kill him. Cool. Yeah. Then I killed the goblin boss, and exactly as I was hoping to demonstrate, there was a 50% chance he'd drop a goblin bow. He didn't, so sucks to be me. Interesting. It's completely broken because if you don't have loot, it won't collect it. I actually would ideally like to fix that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna.
And these are all. It's crazy because when I also have a version of the game that I can open and test and make sure things are working, and it is crazy that like there's a few things in there that just you going through it and like playing through what you have already that were not there the other day, like this weekend when I was messing around with it. So it is crazy to
That's
see
fixed
like
now.
how fast you are doing any of this.
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, I'm pleased with the pace so far. I wish that I wish that it looked closer to how I think we both envision it.
Sure,
But I
but
think
again,
we
like
can only do so
yeah,
much. There's
everything is like
um,
placeholder, knowing like okay, animation and like other designs, background designs, card designs, all of these things are going to come in time as we keep moving.
exactly, yeah.
Which is why I'm like, oh my god, like you are so much further ahead than me. Of
That,
like, there's already things that I'm like, oh okay, like I can see like how I want, this home screen, like we talked about the other day, like having like the town square map
yeah,
as like our landing page, and then going to the dungeon map from there. Like uh I think that is things like that, when they fall into place, are gonna immediately make like a night and day
yeah,
difference.
yeah. That's the thing. Is right now for me and you, we can tell it's going to be a game, but
Yeah.
it won't feel like a game. It won't look like a game for a little while. I'm okay
Yeah.
with that. Like
Yeah,
that's
no,
probably really. Did you
absolutely.
see? I forgot actually. Since you've last seen it, did you see that there's like a dungeon layout at the top now? So you
Yeah,
get like
that is very cool.
battle, event, boss, and then chest. These icons are the same again. This is like from an icon pack.
Yeah.
So in theory, we could use these in the game, but in reality, I don't think it will fit.
No, we'll use our own stuff.
Cool. So
Oh,
I collected
nice.
the loot. I collected the loot there at the end. You can go to the town or the world. I actually don't. These two bits of art I can't use, so I don't actually know
No,
if I'm allowed to
where we
show them
will
on stream. So
again,
done.
everything is I would say
Placeholder.
99% of what we're seeing is placeholder for just to have
Yeah.
something to look at.
Exactly.
And everything will be different.
So we spoke about the blacksmith.
Yeah.
I'll go to the blacksmith in a minute. I think that's the same as last time you saw it. There's also this thing bank, and you're going to see the results of the bank here now. Okay, cool. So what you'd want, what I envision here, is that you would have the list would look a bit tidier than this, but this would be the gist of it. You get a symbol, the description, it would explain what it's been dropped by, and you get a quantity as well. So currently on this save, I have 1 goblin bow,
Nice.
2
Okay.
goblin bones, and 0 everything else. And obviously, you'd probably hide the things that your character or your run doesn't even know exist yet.
Right.
You've never fought a necromancer. We wouldn't tell you about the necromancer gem, and so forth.
Yeah.
So that all works, and this is all linked up now. So that's 2 goblin bones. If I go and kill another goblin, that will go to 3, which is handy. I was going somewhere with this. Yes. So if I restart it quickly, what doesn't happen right now is you can craft at the blacksmith. So maybe I did fix that since you last played, but it doesn't currently consume your resources. So if I'm playing
Oh, okay.
and I go to town, I go to the blacksmith, and I decide, animated shield takes these 2 things. They're different resources, but of course you can't tell because they all have the same symbol. That has 3, and then I think most of these just have 1. Okay, yeah, great. So they all have 1, and the way this is driven, the way I see this, it's playable soon in my head at least, is that you, where are we? Cards. Here we go. Yeah, so most cards just take a goblin bone to craft. You can see here. Is this text readable to you, by the way?
Chat, let me know. is the text readable? I was just thinking that too. Something we'll have for next time is that absolutely
That's
helps.
horrible. Well, for me, it's horrible. I can't see anything.
Oh god. Okay, don't do that then. I'll probably tomorrow set it up to where we'll have full screen options for each of them independently. So for this stuff, which like when you're deep diving into something or showing something, we can switch it to, your screen is up there, it's the full screen. And then
cool. Okay, this should be better now. I kind of zoomed it. At least for a minute. Sorry. So yeah. So all cards have a name. They pick up an image. They have a card base, a description, which are all the same at the moment. Have a set of effects, action, attack, healing, stuff like that. They have a default quantity, which I'll just ignore for now. And they have a set of ingredients. So my plan here is that you would start the game with a starting deck, which will decide what it looks like, and it should be reasonably balanced so that you can beat the first dungeon. You'd run the first dungeon, you'd end up with some materials, which is what I'm calling loot. You could use those materials to build some cards to introduce you to that concept early. Then you'd change your deck so that it's better. You'd improve it. The cards you build would be better than some of the cards you start with. You'd run that dungeon maybe multiple times even off the bat, or maybe just once before you can do another dungeon. And you want to gain the materials to craft the cards, to create a better deck, to do a better dungeon over and over and over again, round and round the loop. We need that playable soon so that me and you can tell if it's fun.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. If the loop works. And what that means is we have to have a whole bunch of cards which need to like relatively fit the theme and the power level and so forth. We have to have a whole bunch of ingredients to build those cards.
Right.
And then we have a whole bunch of dungeons which contain enemies, which have cards, which are of the strength level and so forth. So even though it's like, oh yeah, you can play 2 dungeons, I do think we're going to end that ends up with like 5 or 6 decks of 20 or 30 unique cards total, with, I don't know, at the moment it's only 10 ingredients, but you probably want more. And then my worry is that, and maybe you don't care about this, and maybe if we can just accept this and just move on. My worry is that if we say, oh yeah, it'd be really good for us to have a goblin bone, that the goblin bone only lasts us like 2 weeks before we decide, oh, it shouldn't be a goblin bone, it should be an X or a Y, because that's a much better ingredient for the card that we want. Does that make sense? So
yeah, absolutely.
We never got to the level of deciding what the materials should be called, but I had to make some. So at the moment, it's these.
I mean, that's such a. Even trying to think of a way around that issue that you've just described, where I feel like it is an impossible, or I think it's a crazy ask to, at this point, sit down and be able to plan every single card, plan every single recipe, every ingredient that goes into it, and then start designing things. Where like, sure, that might make sense to alleviate that problem of having to get to a point of, oh, we actually changed our mind and now we want it to be different. I think that's like, it's not necessarily changing the workload, it's just changing where it lands. Lies. Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I've been thinking about it more recently. It's like we're at a place now where there's probably quite a lot of illustrations that would bring the game forward.
Oh, for sure.
Yes, there's a high chance they get thrown away, but the alternative is we hold up. Because we'll change our mind. We'll say, I want this instead. Yeah. But even in that scenario, exactly like you say, all it does is shifts the workload. So you end up doing loads more planning up front.
Yeah.
And then we're in this world of like, can we really predict which direction we'll take it in?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that I'm right there with you, because okay, we say that was something we were interested in, where it's like, okay, we sit down and then we front load it with all of this planning and, you know, like, whatever. Then again, like, there's a very real possibility where, okay, so then we come up with this list. In doing so, that puts a longer wait time on being able to actually like play through something to see if it's fun, if it works, what works about it, what doesn't work. Whereas the other way, where it's like, okay, hey, let's come up with this. Let's, here's some things to get started on. Even if it is, I think a simple solution to this problem could be, for the time being, we come up with a visual like element, some kind of design for anything that's a recipe, like anything that we know is going to be like a recipe or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so whatever it's a cookbook or whatever it is. Then we know to get it to a point where we want to, try and mess around and see what works, what doesn't work. We'll at least have like a unique visual representation for whatever that element is. Whereas, it'll we know it's not just a dagger, it's not just the shield that we're using for everything. It is going to be like our placeholder recipe ingredient. Then, as we go through, then we can do like 2 different weapon types or, whatever. If there's like spells or, rings or whatever it is, like we can come up with just like a handful of different placeholder things that we know are going to be temporary for the time being, until we kind of like, try to like, once we start to plan out and like figure things out as we continue to move along, of okay, well, now we at least have these unique visual representations for each of these different artifacts or different elements to the game. Then we can use those again, like as a placeholder for, okay, we've got it, we figured it out, things are shaping up how we want them to be, this is definitely interesting and fun, and while we're doing that the whole time, there's definitely no shortage of stuff for me to be working on and designing and coming up with. So I think it would maybe be worth that short detour of like, okay, we're gonna take a minute, here's placeholder stuff, like here's like a potion bottle, generic, it can be used any place we have like something like that. Here's like a random ingredient part, like you said, like the goblin bow.
Yeah.
And we can just kind of like use these like strategically to act as like placeholder temporary like visual representation for each individual element, because we can always go back and update them or switch them out as we go.
Yeah, it's a good plan, I think.
Cool.
It's probably a good balance between the two.
So what would those things be? What would that consist of? I'm getting our handy to-do list out. We can add to it.
Yeah, good idea. One of everything is what we're saying.
Yeah.
One.
For the time being, at least, again, like, to allow us anything to have as a placeholder.
Yeah.
To then, that way it gives you something to be implementing into those various slots, or again, like whatever these may be. And also, yeah, knowing like, okay, yeah, we'll come back to this as we go, or while we continue to like really like flesh things out. It'll give us like that. It'll at least act as anything to have as like a visual placeholder for whatever elements we need.
Yeah,
I don't
I'm
know if that
already.
makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. To check we're on the same page, so I'll reboot the game again and I'll tell you my school of thought. So, if I was to make a shopping list, to-do list, everything exactly like Ghost Kid just said.
Yeah.
You mentioned about balancing earlier, Ghost Kid. I'll talk about that in a second. Actually, let me just do this list while it's in my head. So the one of everything. So I got to this page and I'm like, right, we could really do with a background. Like I keep
know.
using these things that's illegal backgrounds is how they're named in my head. I'm sure they're not illegal, but they certainly don't
I do
represent
have
what
that.
we want.
Like those were some of the first things I have on this list. Are okay. I gotta design like our landing menu screen.
We could even just choose like a tileable pattern or a color or something, because I'm thinking what we want to do is align quite quickly to the sort of vibe that we want. The kind of colors and scheme. At the moment it's all over the place, and the next biggest offender is the buttons. They are horrible. They are chosen purely so they stick out on all backgrounds, which is never a good reason to pick. So I was thinking if they could be stretchable and they could go without text, and then font. And we're just going to put that has numbers.
That'll be incredibly fast.
Awesome.
I already have the main font that I've designed. It will take like no time to knock that out.
Awesome. Cool. So that covers this screen, I think. And then once you hit play and you're on this screen, I think it would be cool if you had a dungeon. I put icon, but like image, and I'm going to put full world screen here. Full world screen, and collapse this down as well. Yeah. So here it would be nice if it wasn't a list of buttons that said Goblin Cave, Crypt. Instead, they were in even just dotted around. I think
exactly.
Like you're going to feel like you're looking at a map, which would be cool.
Yep.
And you're going to see the similar thing, which would be shop.
Yeah, we had
building image.
Yeah.
Blacksmith. Bank.
Tavern,
I've added a bank
market,
to this list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Blacksmith.
I've added a bank to this list because you need to be able to look at your materials, which aren't your cards, which isn't for your deck. We're going to end up with a lot of buildings. I'm okay with that, but yeah, and this would be for town screen. So
I think that
all of these buildings to start with would have the same symbol, and it would be like a little house, right? And then we'll just write under them what they are.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. For again, like for the immediate placeholder thing. That absolutely works.
Yeah, so I don't have to look at this image anymore.
Yeah,
which hurts my soul a little bit.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool.
That's that definitely is very specifically helpful for like, okay, for the placeholder version of that, here's what that looks like. That is very helpful.
I think we should do a goblin bone. I think that should be the ingredient.
Okay.
And this, at the moment, that'll be for all drops. And then on my side, I'll make it so I'll show the name of the drop instead of just the symbol.
Right. Yeah.
So that in the interim, you'll get both. You won't just.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. That was for the loot in the town. The blacksmith is the cards, which is fine. That kind of is sorted, I think. Yeah. Cool. And then in the dungeon, so this like flow, like if we imagine like you're in the dungeon, there's these symbols at the top. It occurred to me almost immediately, I actually don't know what you would do to take you from one thing to the next. Like if it's not a button, which is terrible, what makes you enter the fight? Like I guess you see a picture of the goblin, like an image, which
Yeah.
like it's all well and good, but it doesn't do anything. And then you're going to fight the guy, which I'll just ignore the rules for a minute so that he dies quickly. Okay. Then you'll get like a loot screen. Now, if you have a button and a goblin bone, this will be fine. Then you get to the event screen, which I think we talked a little bit about how this could look. And then again, you've got this button to trigger a fight. Anyway, what I'm saying is, I think if we had this stuff, we'd feel a lot further down the line than we currently are. Yeah. And the exception is probably this.
I think that's a big one, and that's something like I have actively been thinking about on like a constant daily basis. Like it never leaves. Where I'm at of what does this look like? Like when you're in the dungeon and you're fighting whatever enemy, how do we want this to be laid out? And so one question I wanted to ask you is trying to think of how to formulate this this thought. So I know you've said design for PC first, knowing that we're gonna port it to mobile.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, okay, if I think this goes a few different ways and I'm trying to like think how something like Marvel Snap looks on desktop when you're playing it versus on your phone, because they're two drastically different like orientations of, is it portrait or is it landscape?
Snap's a good example of where it doesn't really. It's clear that they've gone for that mobile first, and I think the desktop version suffers as a result.
Right, exactly.
Even this is like a mobile ad, right? That's what these look like. But this shows the desktop view quite well. Is they basically just give you more options.
Is there an option or an example of? Oh, I see. This was the screen that I was thinking of. So pretty much they just extend the background for desktop.
Yeah. And for me, this feels like it was designed for mobile, and then they were like, "Oh, and also you can play on your computer."
Right.
Which I'll admit is considerably easier to do than the opposite. If you just give someone more space, it's like, "Oh, great, this is lovely." If you suddenly take all the space away, it's like, "This is horrible.
It's terrible.
Nothing fits."
I think
have the space I need.
A good example of this that I think works quite well is Magic the Gathering Arena, where if you're playing it on your phone, it requires, okay, you're playing it horizontally, like you're playing it, in a landscape format.
Yep.
Immediately that kind of solves that issue because it's already in the same aspect ratio versus like having to compensate, for a lot narrower of a screen space if you're designing like with mobile in mind, and then it kind of alleviates that, but I don't know if that's the best solution. Let's just do it horizontal no matter what.
So in a lot of ways we're currently not that constrained, because if we over to new tabs, the screen's not so cluttered. If you look at this first screen, in fact all three of these screens are relevant here. If we went for a very similar UI placement, so not colors, not designs, not illustration, just things took about the same amount of space and they're in about the same place, we actually, even on this first screen, the battle screen, We don't have that much to show because
Right.
the way the game currently works is things never hit the battlefield. They like resolve immediately. If do you play Magic? Did you say you had?
I do,
played
yeah.
Magic? But not much. Okay. Yeah, so it's almost like all cards are sorceries and instants. There are no monsters, so they don't stick. Now, I would like to introduce some cards that stick, but we're still not in this. Okay, of course, way too many tabs. We're still not in this scenario here where everything sticks. So you're like when these are all full, you need 12 cards on each person's side and 3 big readable locations
Yeah.
and 6 numbers all on a phone screen. That's insane. We have the exact opposite, right? You're never going to have 12 cards on the deck each. That's like
Right.
far where our game currently sits.
I think
But
that's something. It's like that. This exact question is like, again, like, I know something we've started to scratch the surface on, but something that I know we're both thinking about of what does this look like. I think that for me, I want there to be that interactive element, but how do we show that? So instead of like, you know, how it works now and like it's very bare bones state where you click a card and like you said earlier, where it's like, well, unless you're me or you in this situation, it's very unclear what's happening. I think there's you know, a version looking at like all of these, you know, other card games that exist and that are already, you know, successful and are successful for a reason too, where we're just any game in general, card game or not, is what does that look like for this project, for our game, where what do we want it to look like and feel like when, okay, I play this card, what is like the visual thing that happens there? I think like, you know, it could be something as simple as, okay, taking a card from your hand of cards and then putting it I'm playing this card, so then it moves to like the center or something like that. Or is it like there's so many other games, but that one that I keep referencing where called like Brumit's Tale or whatever, that one that I sent like a million screenshots.
Oh yeah.
It has like an alternate name, but I can never remember like what the full name
It's got
is.
a subtitle. No.
Yeah. I have no idea, because that's all it's ever called is like Brumit's Tale, I guess.
Yeah. Hey, we
but-
talk a lot on Discord.
Yeah. Where
Been scrolling the whole time. There we go.
how it works is like, okay, so you have a new blank. So let's say and you have this even with your like the current working version where it's like okay, so there's switching to phone. For anyone watching, I it even remotely cares. I've been for this using Adobe Fresco, specifically because I really like the fact that you can draw using a vector brush. So instead of pixels, there's a like brush tool um, to allow you to just be able to draw in vector, which has been very nice. Just for you don't have to worry about like the sizes of anything necessarily, because instead of being roster based, it's vector, and you can just scale up and scale down things like a million times, and it's completely lossless. You don't have to worry about you know, oh, now the pixels are way too distorted, now I have to redraw something or whatever. I've been using that for this specifically, but there's a million things wrong with it that make it a very programmed. Okay, so something like this where it could be as simple as like, okay, I have like my stats down here and the enemy stats like up there. So this is you, and you have your cards or whatever, and then the boss that you're fighting has a little thing. There's trying to think, because so in like one of these games that we've kind of been referencing or whatever, it's different in a way that you have you're gonna be super round. Let's do so while I'm talking to myself, fighting with that, I'm not the most refined speaker while I'm trying to do a million things at the same time. So okay, in these other games that we've kind of been referencing or whatever, you have a card and you use it, and then you see like some kind of like physical, some kind of animated like representation of that. So say, okay, this is our dagger, and we play it. The card maybe moves up like into that like play area, and then like you would see like an animated like flash effect happen like over the character, and like they recoil from being hit or taking the damage.
Yeah,
it could be something like that, where it's like, okay, I take this card, it's in my hand, and okay, I play this one, so I click it, and then it could be something as simple as like, oh, it like just like moves up a little bit, so like almost in like Magic, where it's like, oh, I've tapped this card. Like there's some simple like representation, like, okay, this card that is in play, this is the attack that I'm using at this time. Then, oh, okay, this does 1 damage. Then you see like either the health bar. I think instead of like I don't know, what are your thoughts on like a health bar versus something like when we were talking about the different like attack modifiers and all of those things, like poison damage and all that, whatever. So a physical like health bar that you do damage and it depletes and moves down as you go along, or just something like, okay, they have their heart icon next to them, and it tells you they have 10 health. Then you deal health, then that just changes to 9. Or whatever it is. Do you have a
So
preference one way or the other of like actual health bar that like
for a short-term solution, I love a heart with a number. Like I
Perfect.
think it just means the numbers can get mad crazy while we
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah.
We take up almost no space, and then later we can go, actually, the health's always 10. Let's make a health bar.
Yeah.
As an example, like that's fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I tell you, I actually think we're going to say the same thing. While you've been doing a nice picture, I've been doing an ugly one. Effectively, we've got a few problems, which I think we're both solving in very, very similar ways. Ignore these things here right now. This heart and this blood and this drop and the shield, which is clearly what they are. I won't hear anything said otherwise. So the first problem, I'm going to write these down. Battle UX problems. The first problem is what happens straight after the player plays a card. So it's not clear that like you use your claymore and you know it does 2 damage and you feel really good about it. That card just like dissolving is probably the worst possible thing we could do. It just kind of disappears from your deck, and then what? Like that's no good.
Exactly.
I think there's a bunch.
Like what just happened?
There's a bunch of cool ways we can solve it. I actually think my favorite way in my head, because I've never seen it, so it may look lame as fuck, was that the shield or the thing I thought could like fly off the card and do the thing, so it separates from the card, and then kind of like you say, they could like slash effect, or if it's a shield, like glow effect, or basically it just flies through them and then they do an effect and then it's done. That in my head, that was like that would look the best. But I'm something. I also like your idea of like a tapping system where you say, so a good example is what I'm playing right now. There's a winged boots here, which gives you 2 actions, right? So if I play this, I'm going to gain an action, but it's weird that I have like an action bar that it's 1 of 1, and then if I play this, it disappears and I gain more actions and so forth, and how that's represented for the enemy. So it's super confusing, the order of things. But if it just got ready to play, you could test your whole turn first. You could go, right, I can go winged boots
before you like confirm. The
trade-off.
That oh man, I like that. I feel like
the trade-off of that is the draw effect, because if you want to be able to draw to give you more options, right? So you play a draw card, you need to see the new cards, then you can't really unplay the draw, right? Because if you could, you've got like the best card in the game.
Right, then what's the point? You can just exactly.
Anything good? No. So I think the first question is what happens straight after the player plays a card, and also what happens as a player decides their turn.
Like, so Magic does something like that, where, I mean, not necessarily the fact that you have to like end your turn or confirm your moveset or whatever, but they have like
phases,
like the action scrying or whatever, where it's like, hey, you can look through your deck for whatever card and then place that. I mean, there's definitely a way where you can do it, I think, where say like you get a draw card or have a draw action or whatever, and then when you try to do that within your turn or whatever, it would still visually play out of like, okay, this is my draw card. Like, and you play it and say, okay, yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is the action I'm performing. But I also want to try to see, like, if I played a dagger and also, I drink the health potion or whatever, how am I looking for this turn? And I think that without showing the card that's the next on the pile to draw or whatever, like, you could still see how the other actions that you want to perform would play out. You just wouldn't know what card you're drawing, where it's like, okay, yeah, you plan to draw a card, but then you also plan to use other actions as well.
So for me, a lot of this comes down to how long a turn tends to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if we end up with a place where typically you get one action,
right,
and most cards don't give you extra actions, like, all of this is redundant, right? You just play your card. You're just like, I'll do this one, please. And if the game's fast paced enough, there's nothing wrong with that. Like in Snap, if it automatically ended your turn, it wouldn't really change the game at all, because you generally play one card. You're like, oh, I'll play this one, please, and then it ends.
Yeah.
So I think this is some of the problems we're talking about, and then the other one is kind of the inverse problem, which is for the enemy. So what I suggested this the other day, and I said I'd explain. I don't think I ever did.
Oh,
I was
being
thinking
able
that
to
what we
see,
could,
like,
yeah. I was thinking that, like, it's your turn, and this is how the enemy looks. This here is clearly a scary goblin, and this is what he's going to do. So he's going to do 12 bleed, and he's going to gain 2 shield. This is his health, and this is his shield bar, which I think we'd, like you say, we'd replace with symbols and numbers.
Yeah,
instead.
exactly.
Yeah, so he's doing this, and that won't change. If that's the case, it allows you to make a really informed turn. A lot of card games do this, where you kind of know what the enemy's going to do. So you know he's going to do 12 bleed, so you can kind of counteract the bleed.
Right.
Yeah, so that was one idea I had. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, for me, I can't see your screen anymore, but that's fine.
What? Wait, you can't see what screen? Like this screen?
The Discord share, yeah. Reduced quality. Interesting.
I don't.
But it actually kind of looks fine. Is it me again? God.
Everything seemed good.
Normal on your end.
On my end,
okay.
yeah. I could be wrong. But I can still see you. I can still see your screen share.
I think it's Discord being Discord then, which is fun. Okay, so in which case I'll carry on and stop staring at that screen. The one advantage that I think this has, if you imagine for a minute that this is what battle would look like most of the time, you'd see enemy health, enemy shield. For argument's sake, you'd have a health and shield as well.
Yeah.
You'd have your hand, you'd see what the enemy's doing, and then you play your cards, and then I guess here you'd have a big end turn button, right? If you imagine that this is what most fights look like, and as you play your cards, they kind of zoom, like shoo, shoo, shoo. What you could also do, and I think this is a very strong option for us to have in the toolkit, is you could have it so that you can fight more than one enemy at once. Because they don't take up that much space, you'd just be able to like stick their things above their heads, show what they're going to do, they take up more of the like we've got a lot of screen space, even if we're on small screens like mobiles. We've got a lot of screen space that we can use. They'd all do different things, and you could ping different cards at different ones of them. This means that you're running a dungeon. We don't have to put you against one goblin, which is quite a hard enemy to feel like a challenge and not.
Right.
And
Not
not yet.
just-
Instead, we can just stick you against more goblins, and their cards can be garbage, and that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one advantage I think is if the downside of this one is that I think a really big pull for this game for me is that you see the enemy use cool cards and then you get those cool cards later.
Right.
And if we boil it down to just this is what the enemy is going to do, it probably won't feel good when you see their cards, if you even see them. Like even if when their turn plays out, you watch this goblin go claymore, blood dagger, bandage, shield. That like you're not going to see that and be like, wow, that's a good card, because you know what it was going to do anyway. That's the downside, I think, of this, of like the enemy turn preview.
Yeah, I agree.
I think this problem is how do you show the enemy's turn? Like the enemy's turn is
exactly
probably more important than the player's turn. Because once the player understands what they're doing, they won't really care. They'll just like do the thing and they'll expect it to happen. But you always need to know what the enemy's doing, because that makes a big difference to your gameplay.
I think so. Okay, I think that when you say that, or when you set up that kind of scenario, do you envision that you would see what the enemy is going to play and then be able to counter accordingly to that?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there could. Please feel free to, talk me out of this or explain how this is wrong. I think that if we do it that way, does that automatically make it easier for just play in general, where it's like, oh well, I know that they're gonna use dagger, so I'm gonna counter with shield or whatever.
It does, yeah.
Versus like, I think. Okay, so what about something like?
If you can see what they're doing always, it moves the game into this weird strategic place where the game in theory is easier, the game in theory is more strategic, but so much of your victories and losses depends on deck building rather than like correct gameplay, because correct gameplay is almost assumed. Like if you misplay, you misplay. There's no like chance, which I'm sure is fun for some people, but it also removes this whole like surprise element of what the enemy will do and blah blah blah. It will change the feel of it massively. Like it will have a huge impact on how the game feels to play and how these enemies feel to like fight.
Yeah. So okay, this is kind of like where my head is at with that. And again, talk me out of it if we're not on the same page with it. So what if, or is this the same thing, that each enemy type, so every time you face a goblin, they would be equipped with like the goblin deck, that every goblin will have the same potential move sets, but they're just like how anyone plays a card game, like the hand that they're dealt is going to be random based on that set deck that they have. Is that
Yep.
correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just the order that they play these in, and the order that they're strategizing or whatever, the like game, however that works, will always be random just within that specific like goblin deck or necromancer deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's cool. I think for me, like
Uh, yeah.
No, go
Like
ahead.
if we comboed, if like I split these problems off into what happens when you play a card, what happens as you're deciding your turn, what happens when the enemy. Yeah, I think if you solve the problem well enough, that it could all be the same solution.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah.
we're saying like, I'm saying, it's nice to preview, and then it's nice and concise, but if we didn't have this, if you like couldn't see what they're going to do, you could still have it so you end your turn and then you watch this goblin like pull a card out of his deck, it flips over, like it does a reveal, and then the dagger flies out and hits your health, or hits your flies past your end of the battlefield. That can be cool, and then this guy could do the same thing, this guy does the same thing, it gives him another turn, he does a second one. I don't think that I think that reveal and show the effect could be cool from both angles. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes the goblin will flip a card, sorry, you'll get to the goblin boss and he'll flip a card and you'll go, a fucking what? And then it will fly and hit you and you'll be like, oh, okay, like that's a very good card, I wish I had that card.
I think I like that version of it better. I think that the other way that we've kind of set up, where it's like, okay, we can see their card that they're going to play before we commit whatever play we're going to do. I think that in theory, or at least like from my understanding of that, is it could get like way too easy way too fast, where essentially like, okay, if you understand like the like core mechanics or whatever, like you're gonna be able to just like and if you have the right deck, you can just fly through everything and just like cheese these dungeons, like
it actually potentially has the opposite problem as well, which is that
right.
sometimes the enemy will say, I'm going to do 12 damage to you, you've got 10 health, no shields, you're going to lose, like it's your turn,
Yeah,
you can
and it's
choose
like,
what you want to do.
I'm gonna lose
Yeah,
him.
but you're
that's a
like,
good point.
I don't have an answer. Whereas at least when it's revealed and shown, it's gonna feel like you've been bested, and you're gonna hopefully you're gonna remember, he did 12 damage in a turn, I need shields if I fight him again.
Yeah, he has that card in there and he could play it, and
yeah, exactly, and you can decide, actually I'm gonna fight him again and I'm just gonna hope he doesn't draw it. That's fine. So
I feel like I really do like the idea, or like just from like a player standpoint, I think it's like keeping that mystery and like that like whatever around it, of like, okay, what is he gonna play? We've both committed our cards, we see like the back of the cards or something like that, like, okay, he's chosen like his card or whatever, but you don't know until it's like you both commit, you both ended turn. Like Snap kind of does that too, in a way, where it's like,
it does.
Okay, we've both finished our turn and now it's revealed, how screwed am I in this situation, versus like having like that foresight of like, oh, there's nothing I can do that I'm going to win here. I think it kind of creates that like, I think I got this, like there's nothing he's gonna do that's gonna be able to counter this, or like that's gonna knock me out of this round. And then it's like, okay, we've both picked our card, we've like hit end turn, and then it's like, fuck, like should have done something different, but now I know that that is a possibility. That is like you know, a card that he's capable of playing. Because I keep thinking too how we've talked about, you know, for the time being, we're thinking of it just as like a player versus computer kind of thing, with the long-term possibility or goal of having it be like a PvP kind of, like, you can play with your friends or, you know, whatever. Um, where I think that, like, in a situation like that, like, again, like, I think it could get like real like, I don't know how much fun it would be if it's like everyone is constantly seeing the cards that their opponent is going to play at any
No,
given time.
absolutely. You're
Like,
right.
does
It
that make
basically
sense?
just, no, it does 100%. You're right. If you add a mechanic in like that, the entire game will be built around it, and you basically
Right.
remove the possibility of having PvP
Exactly. Like,
for
if
forever. Like it
yeah,
just will never work.
like if you think of even a game like Uno or something like that, like if at any
Yeah.
given time you knew like what the person before you was gonna do, you could immediately already be planning your counter for it. Whereas, like, you know, the the fun of it is like, oh fuck, I was never expecting that. Like, now I got hit with like a draw 4 card and there's nothing I can do, or I got hit with a skip card and like I can't do anything other than like skip my turn. Like, does that make sense?
No, it absolutely makes sense. It's a good comparison as well, because sometimes you know that someone's got something in store for you in Uno,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, they're waiting for me, and as a result, you play around that. You're like, I like that I know they've got some plus cards and they're going to use them on me, so I'm
Yeah.
going to turn the direction, so I'm going to skip their
Exactly.
turn, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna, or yeah, and it's true here, right? You know that, I don't know, the vampires make bleed happen a lot, and as a
Right.
result, you're like, I will not get bled. You're like, I will
Exactly.
build my
Like,
deck and play around
you're
getting bled all day long.
you're preparing for the possibility that these things could happen without knowing the direct outcome at any given time.
Yeah.
So like, the strategy comes from, again, like, knowing, like, okay, you might not know the first time you go in to fight the, you know, the goblins or whatever, like, what do they do exactly? Like, what am I up against? But you're gonna find out by the time you've, you know, either died or you've cleared the dungeon. You know, either way, you're gonna find out, like, okay, that's what they do. That's what this one's about. Versus like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good, and now I'm going into the like werewolf one. It's like, oh, I'm good. I, like, you know, took time like crafting stuff that worked for this previous dungeon, and now I'm going to fight this new enemy. I feel good in the deck that I have, and then you immediately like, you're like, oh, I was not prepared for this new, you know, attack or this new
This new mechanic
condition that
like,
could happen. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I think
Yeah, exactly,
I
Ghost Kid. Pokemon is another like perfect example of that. Like, you know the type of a Pokemon, but you don't know exactly what move it's going to use. You know what it's capable of doing.
yeah,
You know, from experience and stuff like that. Of, oh, I've already fought this Raichu. I know that I could absolutely get like obliterated if I like go in with like my entire like water team.
Pokemon's a great example, actually, because there's those gyms in the early stages where you're like, I can actually just keep trying this, because at some point he won't get a chance to use the
just by brute
water
force
cannon.
I'll make it through.
Yeah, you're like, he won't use water cannon and I'll win, and then eventually it works. You're like,
Yeah.
great, I've saved myself hours. Really, you haven't. You spent all day dying, but at least in my experience.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
that's a really good example, actually, because you know a way you could theoretically win,
Exactly.
and a way you can almost guarantee you'll win if you're willing to go and do it.
Yeah.
And you've got the vibe after the first fight. You're like, yeah, I know how this is gonna go.
Yeah, but there's still that like excitement that comes with like the unknown of like, okay, like I'm feeling pretty good. Like, I went and leveled up my team, and you know, I I'm not gonna lose this time, and then you go in again, and it's like that was like an entirely different like combination or order that they did things that I've ever seen before, and I'm still screwed. Like, and nothing happened, and let's try it again, and then you do it, you like get it, and then I feel like that adds to that victory of like, man, like it finally paid off. Like I finally grinded enough to get the cards I needed, the team that I needed, the moves that I needed, whatever it might be, to beat that thing that's been like beating your ass all day.
Okay, cool. So I think I think that was productive. So
Absolutely,
all
yeah.
cards, enemy cards are going to do like a flip, like a reveal.
Yeah.
And then I think the item flies off the card, like as a starting point. It just sounds like that will look and feel cool.
Yeah.
And then we'll do like an effect is shown, and like that will basically do that to be as both informative and like fun to experience as possible, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
If it can cut them and make them bleed, then great. If it does like a red flash and then a bleed symbol appears next to their health, that's also fine, right?
Yeah, and that's the fun thing too about like different attack types or whatever. Like it can look different and feel different for each individual thing. I mean, still obviously like within the same general whatever, but if you get poisoned versus something that deals bleed damage, having like that different visual effect. Cool.
I think for now we ignore the turn planning part of this while we have low actions, and with the potential card draw problem, I think it will be cool to just like fire the cards off. Like when you use that, you watch it go poof, you use that one, poof, and then I'm going to end, and then you watch them do the same to you, like firing their attack. It's actually like the way you've drawn this and the way that Ghost Kid explains it actually could. We said Pokemon as like an inspiration, like for other reasons. It could feel quite Pokemon-esque in how you're playing it. In Pokemon,
like,
you choose one move.
Yeah.
You don't get. It's not a card game, but it could feel quite similar. Like, oh, I've got this. I'll use this, and you watch it happen, and then they do the same, but like a quick back and forth.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even going back to, I mean, card games in general, whether it's Magic or like any of the mobile games that you and I have talked about, where I feel like that's always kind of the natural flow of this playstyle. It's turn-based. Like if it wasn't, it would be something completely different. Like it'd be like a roguelite or something like that, where it's like, oh yeah, I know that they're gonna hit with this heavy attack, so then I have to parry the attack and then counter it with another move or whatever. Whereas like card-based games or something like this, it's going to be turn. Okay, it's phase one, that's player's turn. Then if we like again like Magic has like different stages, but it could be just like, okay, it consists of like back and forth, player's turn, end turn, enemy turn, end turn, and it just keeps like alternating until the fight is over and someone's out of HP.
What do you think about multiple enemies?
I like that. So that is another good example. So, or another good question that let me mess with it.
I'm gonna while you're messing with that, I'm gonna put Ghost Kid in the game as a boss.
Oh, perfect.
At least for now.
So okay, when there's Oh, because it got. Um. So. Okay. In. That one game, the like base name for that game
Yeah.
is Meteor Fall. But
Okay.
the thing is, they had like their first version that they made, and then they made like a better kind of like a 2.0. Essentially, it seems like, where they're like, okay, this is the real one. So this is the one I keep talking about, is that like Rumit's Tale or whatever you call that guy. They have an interesting kind of setup where you're playing. There's multiple enemies on a field at a time, where it's something like it's very like tile based visually. So you might have like 3 enemies across, and then 3 enemies down, and how their sequences work is something like when you see all these things, and they have this thing where it'll be like, okay, some of these cards, assume that each individual one of these is like an enemy card. So you have like a character, and there's so many enemies on the field, where it's like, okay, I know that when I click this, and this might be one dungeon that we're looking at here, where, okay, these are all enemies, and once you clear X amount of enemies, then you progress to the boss fight. And the things that are happening in these other cards are either events or kind of like objects that you can like interact with. So it's okay, here's like a chest where you can like go and like spend some of the currency that you've made or whatever, to buy new cards or buy whatever we want like events to be, where this might be like I don't know, maybe it's like, oh, it's a bonus like potion that you can get, where you take it and you get health like immediately. Something like this is how that works, where then when you click on one of the enemies, it then opens up to this separate fight screen, where it's like you are the character, where it looks kind of back to something along the lines of what we were looking at a minute ago, where it's like kind of like your classic like Pokemon-esque fight scene, where it's like, okay, this is what we're looking at. Obviously, in this landscape, where it's, okay, it's you versus that enemy that you've selected. You have to kind of fight your way through each individual enemy, but you're only doing it in like a one-on-one encounter at a time, versus something like how you had in the visual that you brought up. I think it could. I'm trying to think. So they have it this way where, when you go in and you're fighting an enemy, you can deal, so many turns worth of damage. And then if you decide at any point in that individual one-on-one encounter, like, oh man, like this guy's too strong, you can then back out of that fight. So kind of like a flee mechanic, where then you go back to this and you can be like, okay, well, this guy's down to 2 HP, but this guy's still at full health, so I'm gonna go chip away at him, and hope something happens, that I finally get to pull a card from my pile that is the heavy pot, like big potion that I drink and regain all of my HP. Then you finish that guy off, then you can go back to the guy that you left at 2 HP and finish him off. I don't really know where I'm going with it. I like the idea of having multiple enemies at a time. I think that there's a way to do it where it's not like, oh, every time I go into a dungeon, it's like a 3v1 and I have to go up against 3 enemies all at the same time, that are all like, I walk in the dungeon and before I like get to even like solo one of the dudes out, I'm taking damage from 3 different people. I think that could be miserable. I think that could be like a different level of difficult and would take like a whole entirely different strategy and planning for like what's how you play this. But I do think that there should be multiple like enemy stages of just like pawns that you have to fight through before progressing to like the final dungeon. What are your thoughts? How that?
Yeah, I think I think kind of like you say, there's a different vibe to like you go in a dungeon, 3 goblins, next fight 2 goblins and a skeleton, next fight necromancer on his own. But I think if I don't think we should think of it as a balancing problem. You're the
Oh no, the suspense is killing me.
I'm
Oh wait,
back.
I can hear you again. Okay.
Am I back?
I can hear you. So your audio is at least back. Your visuals
Okay.
are still thinking. Oh, there we go. Cool.
But it's been like a maybe even a full hour since this happened.
I know.
Horrible. What was I saying? Yeah. I think it has a different vibe to it, but from a balancing point of view, the only thing it should give us is more depth. Like you can stop if you ensure that some dungeons have multiple enemies and some dungeons don't. You force their deck to work against both. You make it so you can never get a like I kill everything deck. Which is kind of the fun and problem with deck building games, right? You want your deck to feel a bit broken, but if it gets too broken, nothing's a challenge.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
means if we allow dungeons to have multiple enemies, it means that a skeleton who might be the boss of the graveyard, for an example, when you face 3 of them later, it will feel like you're getting stronger and it's fun and it's cool, and will force their deck to be good at multiple things. So I don't think we should think of it as a balancing problem, but it will change the vibe. Like it will, it will feel like you're cutting down hordes of enemies rather than like going in with like a tactical incursion, kill these 2 creatures, then kill the thing. I know in we mentioned the inspiration of Monster Hunter at some point. In that, fighting multiple enemies is just not that fun. It feels like a big old burden. It's oh my god, we have to fight both these things. That's horrible. And like games like 95% of games like this don't make you fight multiple things at once, and it works fine, right? It's almost like we're adding a layer of complexity at this point, at this stage, for really no reason.
Right,
That's
yeah.
that's my first thought. Was like, it sounds cool. We don't know if it's fun to fight one enemy, and if it's not fun to fight one, it won't be fun to fight 5.
A handful, yeah, exactly. I'm trying to think, because like, okay, something like Play the Spire, you know, they have
Yep.
multiple
They
enemies
fight
and
multiple.
then like solo enemies and stuff, and it still feels good, you know. It's
Yeah, absolutely.
fun to play. But I'm trying to think too, because I think that, okay, from like a overall, like a dungeon consists of standpoint, there should absolutely be multiple enemies like before you can like progress to the boss fight. But I think, so again, thinking, like stepping back, thinking of like the big picture, the ideal whatever version of this is, I wouldn't want to say, okay, how many versions from now the new patch finally comes out and you can like PvP your friends online and whatever. I think that if we do it in a way where initially, if it's okay, you're fighting like 1v3 or whatever, and then we introduce like, okay, and now it is like a 1v1 playstyle, I think it might feel like 2 different games, or it might lose like some of what makes this special to this game. I don't know if that makes sense, or like I would be afraid that introducing something like that would inherently change the entire feel of the game. Of I've been, you know, playing this game for 2 years now, of just being like having to prepare and like be this like heavy damage dealing, but also whatever it is, in the headspace of knowing that you have to fight 3 enemies versus then immediately rolling it all back to be like, and now there's like a 1v1 and you can fight your friends, and without it like feeling too drastically different. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Does
it makes total sense. I think for overlapping but slightly different reasons, I think we should just stick to one. And like, if like a couple of months from now we're like, "Ah, it needs more," like, yeah, we can add more
Yeah.
guys in. Like, that's fine. Like,
absolutely.
but for the offset, it introduces a whole set of problems which I think easier just not to deal with. And
This,
arguably, we may never have to deal with them.
I think, okay, hold on. Bear with me. So there's, what about a version of this where, think of it like, okay, so whatever the dungeon layout and format looks like, we're going, it's always going to be a 1v1 fight. But what if there is a special event or a special dungeon that occurs where once in a while you're going up against like a specific enemy that is more than one creature, to where like, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out this thought as I go.
So
Where,
I had this thought before, or something similar, I guess. Was that like maybe slimes and similar like they split, right? This is a common mechanic in games
Right.
where slimes and oozes, they kind of split and split and
Yeah.
split, and that's their problem. And I thought, in theory, I love it. Like this like Dungeons and Dragons classic is like, oh, you killed the Hydra. Well,
Yeah.
now there's a two-headed Hydra. It's
Exactly.
Like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. It's cool. But from our point of view, that gives us like all the negatives of fighting multiple enemies as
Sure.
like game devs, and none of the and only one small positive.
Right.
Because we have to implement like a targeting system. Like you're playing your card, which enemy are you targeting? That's not going to be fun to like target as a player. You want to make it feel good, and then
Yeah.
even to implement it is going to be like not annoying. So I'm quite excited to avoid all those problems.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. I don't know. I have this idea of like I don't know what this would look like. And maybe this isn't that example. I stopped the music for a second. I was trying to find something at all like more lively to put on. Um so instead of something like that, again, maybe this is nothing. What if there's like, I don't know, whatever it is. I'm sticking with goblins for the reason of just example where there's a chance encounter that, okay, we go into the goblin dungeon and I don't know, again, the logistics of how anything like this is possible.
Sure.
But okay, say you go into the dungeon and you know, like we talked about a few days ago, where it's like you have like these decisions or these options of, do you go down the left hallway or the right hallway? And you know, you go down one and you fight a goblin. Okay, perfect. But then there's like a special enemy type where it's like the goblin twins or something, and that specific variant enemy has like some kind of additional benefit. I mean, it would be terrible for you or like, you know, a new challenge for you, but it would be like, okay, this enemy has like the ability now to take 2 turns, whereas like other enemies take 1. And you know, maybe I'm like way overthinking that, or like this is way too wordy to be like, yeah, there's different types of enemies that have like different attack types.
No, I think I love all of that. I think I love the idea that for some enemies we could say it's you know, there's a meme in Dungeons and Dragons which is like, it's 3 kobolds in a trench coat. You could fight a few
Yeah.
kobolds, then you could fight 3 kobolds in a trench coat.
Exactly.
And it's one enemy. He has one deck of cards, 1 health bar, but he just does some things which make it feel like you're fighting 3 guys in a trench coat. I think that could be cool.
Yeah.
I think, like, I know I just reworded what you said, but yeah, I think that could
No,
be cool.
that's
I
exactly
also think it would be cool
like a more
to have enemy
distinct way.
variants.
Yeah.
Enemy variants, I think that would be cool too. So you could have a skeleton and you fought loads of skeletons. And then just sometimes when you're meant to fight a skeleton, like you say, there's an event or something and it's like a flaming skeleton. And it's like, it's got all his normal moves, but then it's also got some fire cards mixed in there.
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
all abilities deal 1 fire damage just on top of his normal stuff. It's like a rarity modifier where it's like, oh, just
Exactly.
sometimes.
Yeah.
I love that too. 1 second. And then there's one other idea you slipped in there, which I was a fan of too. But, Anyway, yeah. In general, I think that's I think it's cool. I think
Yeah, I think that could be
oh
fun to have, exactly like you said, like enemy rarity modifiers is like,
it,
oh, there's a 5% chance that when you go into this dungeon, you could have to fight this terrible thing before you get to the boss fight. But the majority of like the spawns are either going to be a goblin or it's going to be a skeleton, and you know what you're up against. But there's also kind of like, I mean, I know we talked about that earlier too, where it's like, oh, there could be like, you know, the mini boss before you get to like the big boss. But I think this is still something different than that.
yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
I think it's cool. It ties into another idea I had, which it might be too early to float. Maybe we want to play the game a bit before floating this, but I had an idea of like, if there was only a certain amount of dungeons, say there was 10, okay, say we had 10 dungeons in our whole game when it released, or we knew we were aiming for a number like that, where you know you can count them, you can remember them. It's not
Yeah.
30, yeah, it's like it's 15 or less. If we had that, and all of them have a unique boss, I was thinking what we could do is make it so every unique boss breaks the rules of the game. So some of them don't show you their cards when they're revealed. Well, that's what one of them does. One of them, you know, shuffles your hand into its deck every time. One of them has 2 actions. One of them has double health. Blah blah blah. I was basically just thinking we could just go through a list of bosses and go, this is how this boss breaks the game.
Yeah, I like that.
The downside to this is if you unlock them, and we were saying, you know, you could grow them and unlock them, it's going to be really hard for them to both break the game and give it to the player so that the player can, or you don't give it to the player and then they feel robbed. They're like, oh man, it was so
Okay,
cool
I
when
think
the guy
that
did
the solution to that specific feeling or whatever is, so the bosses would have those specific individual like game breaking things that each one can do, but they would still have like a unique deck or like whatever it is. Like, oh, I know that, like, you know, the Goblin King has like the like Skull Crusher, and it's like this absolutely like massive hammer card, like a weapon card or whatever, and that would still be the thing that you're going for. You're like, okay, I know that is the card I'm grinding for. That is why I want to, you know, keep going back and like fighting this enemy time and time again, because I want that card to add to my deck. But you just wouldn't have that like game breaking mechanic that the boss has. That's just something that you have to get past in order to, you know, if you want that card bad enough, it's something you have to put up with while fighting that boss if you want to get the resources or, you know, whatever it is. I think that that's cool, and it having those like cool cards or whatever it is that are like the big key things per enemy, like that's going to be the thing that you're after the most when you're playing it. And you just know that, like, I mean, look at, you know, even something like Elden Ring or whatever, where it's like, oh man, I know I want that weapon, like that's going to be so cool, and then you get it and it's like, well, it's not as cool, but it still does the thing, and like, you know, I like the thing that it does, but it was a lot cooler when he did it, like against me, or like it sure seems like it was doing a lot more damage then.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and it's the same in Pokemon as well. Like,
Yeah,
you catch the Pokemon and you're like, man, this guy's weak as shit, but I'm gonna train him up. I'm gonna make him good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that is a cool additional feature without you know, having to worry about oh man, are they going to be mad that they don't get to like play as this thing or whatever? Um, like, well, you're getting something cool anyway, so it's still worth it. I realized I never showed you any of this stuff, and I wanted to
I didn't.
wanted to share this with you. Um, if you can you see my screen still?
I can, yeah. Did
Okay.
you hear me?
Wait, did I hear you what?
My internet cut again. I disconnected. It's so bad tonight. It's never been this bad before in my life.
That's what I told you, like right before we went live. Like, you can do anything and everything to like troubleshoot a million things, and then as soon as you hit like and start stream, and everything falls apart, and it's like I didn't even know this was a problem I was gonna be faced with until this very moment. Keeps it fun. So okay, this was a few whatever ago, like a couple weeks ago now, where I was doing just like initial things of like, okay, what does this look like, and whatever. And I think that for whatever reason I kept assuming, well, the enemies would still have the same layout as cards. I don't know why I would assume that. Like, thinking of it like as, you know, something like magic cards or Pokemon cards. Like, oh, I know that I want to add that creature, that boss to my deck. But I think that I think it's more interesting
Yeah.
where it's not that. Like, you're not adding the monster to your deck, you're adding, you know, the weapons that make him what he is, or like, you know, whatever it is. Like, oh, if he wears like a special like talisman, that's what it is that you're after, not the actual like beast that you're fighting. Um so immediately all of this like orientation wise kind of goes out the window, but I still wanted to share some of the kind of like rough ideas of like, okay, what does it look like, or what would be fun and different of like um just like, is it, so some of these get real rough and like uh just like super gestural, um but something like this where it's like, oh, is it like a full body image that we're seeing of this guy, where he's like, oh yeah, it's like, you know, he's there and he's sitting on his throne or whatever. um like it's more of like, again, like a Magic the Gathering kind of card art that you're seeing, where it's like, oh yeah, there's the Goblin King, and he's like on his like, you know, pile of bones and gold and whatever, and like he's got his big old like club in the foreground, and like some like a pike with a lesser goblin head on it in the background or something. But I think that like having it be more of like what we were looking at a minute ago, where, and maybe that's not like the immediate solution or whatever, but like more along the lines of having like, oh, there is the enemy kind of like profile picture type thing, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be in a frame, but like, oh, it's kind of more of like a traditional like bust, like, you know, shoulders up of the enemy, versus, you know, oh, it is like a full body kind of theme that we're setting. um how do you feel about going
Yeah,
one way or the other?
they're awesome. They're very cool. The I could see these. You showed one earlier where he had a hammer. Some of them I think I might have missed because my
That's
internet's not
okay.
powerful enough for the
There's
split stream.
this
Soul
one where
split
it's
stream.
like he's holding it, then there's like a full layers, and that's another thing that oh, this one, I think that's what you're talking about, like Oh, he has a hammer.
Yeah, these are all super cool. I think on the gravestone with the title card, you could probably drop these in like 1 for 1 in the dungeon. Like if you had some event, and then before you fight them, basically this thing's just gonna like appear on your screen, and it's like, it's time. Like click it or tap it, whatever, and you're about to fight them. I think that's super cool.
Yeah. Okay. And then I mean, even then, okay, so you draw, or it's like, okay, the rest of the thing is filled out or whatever. Then you go into the actual fight, and we might be seeing it like slightly different, where it's like, okay, so once you're in the fight, now what you're looking at is just like, oh, and then it's like just that kind of thing. Like, oh, you're fighting him, or frame or not, like it could still like kind of inherently, like more organically be framed, where like, where's this guy? Like, okay, so we see that he's in the top corner and you're fighting him now, and it's something like that where, okay, the edge of the screen drops it, and then like whatever else that the actual like dungeon layout looks like would be, okay, maybe he has like a nameplate underneath him, that like kind of again like inherently like frames him while still keeping him kind of just like out and about, or it could be like a whole uh um where it's like, okay, this is him, and then you have like your little area where like, okay, your cards all live or whatever, and then like character like icon profile picture thing.
Yeah, I love that.
You can see like the back of their cards or whatever it is, and then I like the idea of like, okay, so I take this card, and then like the sword flies off and like slashes him, and he deals damage, or he takes his damage, but there's a more interesting layout, because why do we have all of this negative space?
Yeah, I had, while I was rambling earlier about this problem, and I was like, oh yeah, put enemies everywhere, and they tell you what they're going to do, and other strange ideas. I had a more strange idea, which I kept to myself, which was that, right, you're gonna have to really invoke your imagination here.
I'm ready
for this to be. What if you're in the fight? Make my screen look fighty. There we go. And I'll make it bigger, so the gap in the middle is how it would be.
I'm trying to. While you do that, Ghost Kid, he has a skull as a hat on his head. I saw you said, was that a smaller face on his face? If this program ever worked how it was intended to, that'd be great. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, so imagine here, I click a dagger. The dagger flies off, hits the Goblin King, and then goblin bones kind of scatter out of him onto the battlefield, but not like oh, it's super gory and there's tons of animation. I mean like the only way to describe it is how like the loot drops out of creatures in Minecraft.
Yeah.
So and then I was thinking you pick them up while he's taking his turn. Now this is going full on mobile game, it feels good to pick up my loot with my finger rather than it appear in my inventory. But it means that the battlefield will get like splayed with materials that you'll want to pick up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a good idea, but it's an idea.
No, I like it. I'm my gears are turning of trying to think like, okay, like how does this, what does this look like, or how can we, what is the best use of space within that. I think that's interesting, of like actually having loot brought from them that like, oh cool, now I gotta, tap those and pick those up, and that is then what is added to your inventory. Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like there's like an infinite amount of options of things that we can actually do, and how do we want to move forward is gonna, like, they go hand in hand, but trying to solve the same question at the same time of like, okay, what is the mechanic that is going to make this a fun game versus what does that look like visually, and how do we represent that? And it's just like this kind of like Ouroboros infinite loop of like which problem gets solved first. Of, does the look solve itself first, or does the functionality dictate what is needed visually? I don't know the answer to, to that question. And does the mechanic come first, or does the visual, which inspires which? The mechanic inspires the visual representation of it, or is it, hey, this is a cool layout and orientation, now what fits within like those parameters, kind of thing?
Have you ever played a game called Inscription?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, first of all, it's insanely good. Like,
Okay.
better than any game has any right to be. And if I ever made a game that was
high praise, I gotta add it to the list then.
It may be like one of the best games I've ever played. It's that good.
It's pretty good.
But it is a card game, at least at its core.
Uh-oh. You're getting choppy again, and your camera died. Oh my god, the video died now too. Okay. We'll wait. I have to hear about the best game you've ever played.
One of.
Well, yeah, one of the best.
Another tab, because I feel like that's what caused this whole thing. Is that my ping right now? Okay, can you still hear me?
I can still hear you. Yeah. Oh, dang, Ghost Kid. I have never personally heard of it before. Okay. So at least as far as from my end, the like visual design and art aspect, and not say that it has been an inspiration for me, but I'm very interested now. Even in the 2 seconds that we got to see the little screen share, I'm on the edge of my seat. We'll see what happens.
I can hear you perfectly, but I get the real feeling you can't hear me.
No, I can hear you. I can absolutely hear you. Oh, your camera's back
Excellent.
now.
Okay, in which case,
Okay, the screen share is also back. Sick.
okay, so I'm not going to show any more. You see this panel on the right here? Yeah, he's got some
Yeah,
cards
yeah.
in his hand, and there's like a battlefield in front of him. Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's kinda
what I was
cool.
going to say was Inscription. The reason I'm bringing Inscription up now, I mean, there's about 1,000,000 points of inspiration we could take from it that maybe
Sure.
we're missing by not doing that. But if we put those all to one side, one thing it does very, very well, that you can kind of see in the screenshot here,
It's like a
is
POV, like a first person. Of course, as soon as you as soon as you started like saying anything,
it
it all went out again.
ignore. Of course it did.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, maybe I'm back. Maybe it wasn't
Maybe,
that bad.
okay. So far so good.
Okay, that was cool. You hear me now?
Yeah, yeah.
This is so bad. Basically they throw out this idea of like optimizing what's on the screen and what's not. Like Snap is so good at this. Inscription throws it all away, and so much of the game is just dedicated to like vibes,
Yeah.
to like feeling. And a good example of that is your health in the game is like a set of scales, and you have to like look over to see the scales. So what I was thinking was you could dedicate this entire middle section to even something like a health bar. It could be, it could be your character and the enemy face to face, and that they could just look more and more injured as they fight. Because we've got all that space, we could just use it to like conjure up vibes. Like, it's not for picking up loot, it's not for showing abilities, it's just purely to like set the tone. And Inscription does this very well. As like, if you know that the gameplay is good, it doesn't feel like wasted screen space to like
Right.
to have something so simple represented so big.
Yeah, I think that's for sure worth exploring, because I think that I think anything we can do to make it feel more immersive, the better. Yeah, I think that's interesting. Just as a spooky theme card. Okay. Yeah, I'll for sure have to check it out. I've never heard of it before, but sold just on that little bit alone. That sounds very cool.
It's one of those games that probably consume your life for like, I don't know, let's say 20 hours.
Yeah.
And then you'll be done, and you'll think about it like once a week for the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's fair.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
it's not that
absolutely.
long. It's not infinitely replayable. But once you've played it, it's like so hard to shake.
That was a
Like,
good
I
game.
wish I could play that again.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should play that again without knowing anything, just from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, that's I think that if replayability, and that makes that sound like it's a negative thing. I was gonna say, like, if there's not like an inherent reason to be coming back to something, so like, oh, there's the new season pass, or whatever, there's like, if it is just like a finite experience, I think that is like the most that you can ask for, is to create something that's so impactful that it just stays with you, like, no matter how long ago you played it or whatever. It's like, that is like, I remember playing that game, like I remember where I was, I remember like everything about it, because it was like so good that I might not be like,
That's
comping to like get back in and like replay it anytime soon necessarily, but like you're just thinking about it. You did a good job. If you can pull that off, I think.
Yeah, that's Inscription. That's very good fun.
Cool.
I think I'm gonna have to go. One, because of the time, and two, because somehow my internet's getting worse. I blamed my wife. It definitely wasn't her fault. She's been in bed a long time.
Yeah, I know it is. We're on two very different time zones, but absolutely, this was, I would say, incredibly productive. I think we kind of nailed down a lot of things that, and if not nailed down, we're at least have moved in a substantial direction than we were at a few hours ago. That's great. I think that's all we can ask for, really.
Yeah, I'm super pleased. I think we got a lot of decisions we needed to get done. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also too, from my end, there's a lot of immediate things that I know I can start working on. So I'm
Awesome.
excited, feeling good. Ghost Kid, thank you for hanging out, and for anyone else that hopped in,
Yeah,
thank
thanks so
you.
much.
We are going to be trying to do this at least once a week, the SoulSplit stream, where it's both of us kind of doing exactly what we did today, showing both sides of development, everything that we're working on, and going to try and be, as transparent with the whole process as we can. And I will also be streaming on this channel, just if Derek can't make it, or again, we're on two very different time zones and stuff, so it might just be a lot of what, if you were again coming to my other channel, a lot of what you saw there, just chill vibes and working on art for this, because yeah, there's a lot to do, but it's gonna be fun. And if you haven't already, I'm gonna drop our socials in there, and we also have a new Discord server as well, so smash that follow button on anywhere that you want to, because yeah, we're gonna hopefully have a lot more to come on all of those, in all of those spaces. So yeah, cool. And I think we had talked about, again, trying to, for the time being, we're gonna try and stick to Wednesdays for the SoulSplit stream. Anything changes, we'll let y'all know, but that's the plan for now, at least, is every Wednesday around the same time, try and do these SoulSplit streams. So yeah, we will see you guys later, and thanks for hanging out.